We're going to take a quick look at the topology that Collaboration Cert is using for the CCIE Collaboration Lab exam. So as you can see in this picture, we've got three sites. We've got the headquarters site over here, we've got site B, and we have site C. These are the three sites that are visible or configurable by the CCIE Lab candidate. This fourth site, which is the backbone site over here, this is invisible to you when you're sitting the lab exam. This site contains, as you can see, a publisher, core manager, TMS and VCS, and a PC which has the Cisco Jabber for telepresence, aka the Movi client, attached. So this is obviously in a cloud. We can't configure or see this. I wouldn't say you should focus too much on the backbone site because you don't know what they are going to do. The purpose of the backbone site is for you to make point SIP trunks to the VCS clearly, but maybe they've introduced other problems in the backbone site that you as a candidate are going to have to troubleshoot. So you obviously don't know what they're going to be doing there, and it's pointless if you spend too much time with this backbone site. Our obviously Collaboration Certs racks have this. We have introduced troubleshooting problems, but if you're building your own rack at home, I'd say it makes sense to simply have any problems that you want to do between UCM, two UCM clusters. You can just put it into this site B. You can have UCM to UCM calls between HQ and site B over here. So you don't really have to, if you're struggling with processor memory in your host ESXi or whatever else you're using, then you can kind of ignore all that stuff and do a lot of the inter-cluster work between the site B and headquarters. So this backbone site obviously has a PSTN phone. There's some PSTN cloud, which most likely is using a Cisco gateway of some description. We've also got the backbone, which is your frame relay or MPLS cloud as well. So what we've done is we've obviously built it exactly as you'd find in the real testing center, but we're really going to focus on how to go about building your rack. We're going to focus more on the headquarters, site B and site C, which is under your control. That is configurable by you, the CCIE Lab candidate. So without further ado, let's just have a quick look at the headquarters site. We've got a publisher, core manager, and a subscriber. And obviously we've got to make sure database replication is good there. We've got the Unity connection, and we've got the IM in presence, which was formerly known as the CUPS server, the presence server. So these four appliances are running 9.1. We've also got the Contact Center Express, which was in the previous blueprint, version 7, was running on Windows. This is now appliance. It's switched to the appliance now. So this is version 9.0. So we'll take a look at, we'll go into each one of these appliances and have a look at it and make sure that we've got the right versions on there. We've also got a PC, which is Windows 7, and we have the Jabber client installed on here. We are not 100% sure which version it is, so we've got version 9.1 and 9.2 running on here. There are some slight differences with the way the client works, particularly when it pulls down voicemail from a Unity connection. IMAP's deprecated in version 9.2, so it's quite important that you have some familiarity with version 9.1 as well as 9.2. That's the Jabber version, that is. So Windows 7 got Jabber on. What else do we have on there? Well, we've got RTMT installed on there. We've got the CCX editor, so you can do scripting. It's already installed. They don't want to, when I say they, the Cisco testing environment, the proctors, the content team there, they don't want you as a candidate to be installing anything in your 8-hour lab exam. So everything that you need will be installed on the PC that you're working on, or this PC which is running as a virtual machine connected to your pod or your rack. So RTMT, the CCX editor, you've got Putty installed here. You can SSH into the appliances if you need to do any work on the command line. What else do you have here? You have a USB camera attached, so Jabber can make video calls to other video endpoints. It could be another Jabber client, it could be a Movi out here in the backbone, it could be to the 9971 phone that we have over in the headquarters site. Which leads me on to the Voice Vlan, which is comprising two devices. You've got the 7965 phone over here, and you've got the 9971 phone over here, and there's a USB camera attached. As I previously mentioned, you can make video calls back to the Jabber client running on HQ PC. Perhaps the biggest difference, reading in the forums where people are getting caught up on, is the gateways. R1, which is our HQ gateway over here, it is an ISR G2 in our racks. We've got a 2911. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it is a second generation ISR, which is quite significant because you cannot run the older PVDMs, the DSP modules. So when you have an ISR G2, you are forced to use the PVDM3. PVDM3. Okay, so let's just clean that up there. You have to have the PVDM3s, which are very, very expensive, and you can't use its predecessor, the second generation PVDM, in the ISR G2. So this is the big cost if you are building your own rack. I've built about 10 racks for Collaboration Cert, and believe me, these do not come cheap. And so obviously if you're on a budget and there's some constraints there, you could get by with using the first generation ISRs, 2811 more than likely. It's a lot cheaper, but bear in mind you're not going to be running the exact same version of iOS, and you won't have the ability to do video conferencing, and there are some obviously quirks when you have a different version of iOS, but you can for the most part do a lot of the work with your ISR first generation, and then maybe use a rack rental to bridge the gap between PVDM2 and PVDM3. The configuration is more or less the same, but there are some video enhancements added. So when you go through the SCCP and DSP farm commands, you do have some additional options that you won't see with PVDM2 and the 2811 first generation ISRs. So bear that in mind, and this is very critical, that you are able to do video conferencing between the Jabber clients and the 9971 phones. So I wouldn't say you should go out and remortgage your house or tap into your kids' college fund in order to buy 3 ISR G2s. Don't do that. Let the kid go to college. Don't refinance the house unless you get a really, really good rate. I'd say if you do have a bit of a budget issue, then stick with the 2811s, but you must make sure you've got 20, 30, 40 hours on the 2911s with the PVDM3 modules doing video conference. In other words, use the rack rental for that component. But in the ideal world, yes, you should have every gateway running the right version of iOS with the right PVDM3 modules in there. Okay, so that applies to R2 and R3. We've got them as 2911s with PVDM3 modules in there. Again, same story. If you have a problem, just use 2811s. So we also have a WAN connection here. On the LAN side, we have a 3560 or a 3750. Either one will do. You need one of those switches to connect everything, obviously. Power over Ethernet for these devices over here. And you need to practice your LAN QoS or campus QoS on that 3750 or 3560. Okay, so over at Site B, we have a subset of what we had at HQ. We've got a publisher, Unity connection, and a presence server, IMP. And we also have a PC. Again, this is running Jabber, has a USB camera attached, and we can make video calls between the two Jabber clients, and obviously instant messaging between the two. So this is a really big difference between the predecessor, the CCIE voice track, where we only had a single cluster and it wasn't distributed call processing. It was centralized call processing at the headquarters site. There was no other call manager cluster involved. This would have been a remote site, and maybe you could have had CME on the site C. So this is the big difference. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more inter-cluster work here, most likely SIP trunks, and also we've got Unity connections and our IMP servers talking to each other between HQ and B. So that's a really big difference. Obviously increases the number of virtual machines. Going back to what I was saying before, you really want to focus, that is a minimum. You can't shortcut this. You need to have all these virtual machines. There's 10 virtual machines there. You've got the 5 appliances over here in headquarters and the 3 on site B, and then you have a PC at both sites. So that's really your minimum number of virtual machines that you're going to have running in your rack if you're going to build your own rack. And if you've got enough memory, CPU, then by all means build this third site. But there's not a whole lot of work we're going to be doing in there as a candidate. Okay, that's really for the proctor to set you up with certain problems. Okay, again, obviously that's 2911 over in site C. This is a E1 PRI link to the PSTN versus T1 PRI links over at HQ and site B. So this is in a European or a country that's using E1 circuits as opposed to T1s. You don't have any appliances, no UCM cluster. So this could either be a remote UCM site registering to B or HQ, or an independent call manager express, or communications manager express, I should say. In terms of devices, on site B we've got a single 9971 phone. We've got over in site C a 9971 video phone, and obviously in B it's a video phone as well. We've got a 7965 down here as well. So this means we could potentially be using telephony service if this is a CME R3, and we could be using voice register pools because 9971 devices only support the SIP stack, so we can't use skinny on these 9971 devices. So in this situation, if R3 and this was R2 and this is R1, if R3 is configured as a communications manager express, it means you're going to potentially doing a lot of telephony service work and voice register pool work, unless they've actually put the SIP firmware on the 7965 phone. So watch out for that. That's another big difference that you could potentially see. You do have the option for SIP phones in this blueprint, whereas beforehand it was mainly based on skinny. Okay, so in terms of handsets, we've got 5 devices, 2 at headquarters, a single one at site B, 2 at site C. That's 5, and then we have a 6th one, which again is not under your control. You'll see that's got a bunch of numbers already configured. It's already registered to something, and that's your backbone phone or your PSTN phone. That's simulating the PSTN, and you can make calls to it and from it. It could be SIP trunks or your PRI connections. So you do have this 6th phone, which is not under your control, but it's very important that you use this a lot because a lot of your testing is to this device. And again, we could do video calls because it is a 9971 with a camera attached, so we could have video calls to this device. So that gives you an overview of the topology. Just a quick look at the gateways. Here's R1. So we have this as a 2911. The version of iOS we're using is 15.2.4. What else do we have on R1 for the show inventory? We have the VWIC 3. This is our PSTN connection. We've got the HWIC 2T, which is our WAN connection. We're using one of those ports for our WAN connection. We've got, in this case, don't be too afraid of what I've got here. I've got a PWDM 316, but I also have a 256 module, which is extremely expensive. This is a bit overkill. This is just my own personal rack. I don't think this is necessary. I would provision on R1 a couple of these PWDM 316s. You want to have enough DSPs for your PRI connection to the PSTN, and you also need to have some DSPs for your conferencing or transcoding. So I'd say a single PVDM316 channel, it would not be sufficient. In this instance, I would say you'd need a couple of those provision, which is going to save you a bit of money. You don't need to have the 256 channel, which will cost you an arm and a leg. Okay, so you've got the PSTN connection, you've got the couple of these PVDM modules. Again, if you're using a 2811, then you're going to have PVDM2 over here, but again, you can't do video conferencing in this instance. So over here at the headquarters site, you've got R1, which is connected to the headquarters switch, which is in my case a 3560, and this is a .1Q trunk. The 3560, let's have a quick look at that. This is our HQ switch. This is where a lot of your campus QoS will be done, because it's the only switch per se that you have in the blueprint. So get your hands and make sure it's running version 15.02. Okay, so it's very important that you're having the right version, because AutoQS is different. When you run AutoQS on the switches, it's different version from version. On R2, very similar to R1, it's a 2911. It's obviously running the same version of iOS 15.2.4. Over here, though, we have a couple of differences. I haven't invested in an extra PVDM3. I've just got a single one, 16 channel, which will be good enough for my PRI connection, my PSTN connection, my bearer channels. We also have our WAN connection, our HWIC 2T. We're using one of those ports to connect to the frame relay or MPLS cloud. We have a ether switch module. So in R1 we have a separate switch. Over here in R2 and also R3 we have this EHWIC, this 4-port ether switch module over here where our phone is connected here. So this is why we've got this EHWIC 4ESG with a P. The P means it's got power over Ethernet. If you're going to use this module with power, you need to have the right power supply. So we've got the PWR 2911 PoE power supplies in there, which means that we can provide power over Ethernet to the phone over here in R2 in Site B. So if I do a show power inline, you can see that we have a single phone here getting power. So what else do we have over here? We've got the VWIC 3 1MFT, which is what we had in R1. This is our PSTN connection, and this is connected to the PSTN. This is a T1 PRI in our case. R3 is very similar to R2. Again, we've got 2911 running the right version of iOS. If I do a show inventory, we can see much the same as R2. R2 and R3 is very similar, but there are a couple of additional items here in R3. This is the expensive one for me. We've got 2911, the WAN connection. We've got the ether switch module, which is getting power or providing power over Ethernet to the phones. So we need the right power supply in there. We have the VWIC, the PSTN connection. Now I've got, again, a bit like R1, I've got two PVDM316s here, because with Unity Express there's a need for transcoding, and also we could have video conferencing as well. So I've got R1 and R3 with two of these 16 channel PVDM modules, whereas R2 had only a single one, and I think that should be your optimum. That's really ideal in my opinion. We've also got this SRE, the Services Ready engine, with Unity Express installed on there. You need this version, or this Service Ready engine, to install version 8.6. So Unity Express is not shown in this topology diagram, but it is connected here, and it is running version 8.6 is connected into R3. So that hopefully gives you a good overview of the items on the collaboration blueprint without wishing to forget the backbone router. Now the backbone router, I think you can just go ahead and use a 2811, which is what I've done over here, one of the later versions of iOS. And over here and these are quite cheap, these modules, we've got all the PSTN connections being terminated here, and we've got the WAN connections being terminated. We've got the HWIC40. So remember, R1, R2, and R3 each have a PSTN, ISDN connection to the 3 ports I've got here. So I've got a 1 port T1E1, I've got 2 ports, that's 3 ports, and that's PSTN termination for R1, R2, and R3. And we've got 3 WAN ports connected to R1, R2, and R3. And we've got DSPs here, sufficient DSPs, so that we can run 3 PRI connections to R1, R2, and R3. So that's our backbone router, and again, this wouldn't be configurable by you in the lab exam. So the GUI is much the same, version 9.1. There's a few extra enhancements, but it's more or less very familiar if you're used to version 7 or 8. In this instance, the version of Core Manager is 9.1.1. If I go to my contact center, everything's version 9.1 except for this contact center Express, which is using version 9.0. So in my instance, I'm using 9.0.2, and everything else is using 9.1. It's always a good idea to use a 2511 access server. So you've got this 2511 or any other kind of access server, and this has a connection to the console port on each and every one of these gateways. So you need the right cable in the 2511, and you will have connection to every one of the devices, so that we're not dependent on connectivity between our PC, maybe in our house or wherever. It doesn't really matter where it is. Okay, we just need connectivity to this access server, and this is console. We console into R1 and all the other gateways and switches and whatnot. So this means that we can shut down interfaces and reload routers and still maintain a connection, and this is very useful. You should get yourself a 2511, which is the cheapest way of doing it. Don't forget though, you need to have the special cable and the special interface that will allow you to put it on the network. So the 2 pieces that you're going to need if you do have your own access server or terminal server, you need the cable, which allows you, it has 8 console connections, and it allows you to connect into the 5 devices, and you'll have 3 spares in that case. And you need this AUI to RJ45 transceiver to get this 2511 on the network, because there's no RJ45 connection here. So there are other ways of doing it, obviously, but this is what the Collaboration certs topology is using. And that way, you would just telnet to the 2511, and this first port, you would change the port number. So let's just say I'm telnetting. I would put in fact, let me just actually do it. If I want to telnet in, then I'll do a telnet and the 2511 IP address or host name. In my case, it's this. Now, if I just left the port number alone, it'll be using port 23. This takes me to the terminal server or the access server. But if I change the port number, and the first console or async port is connected to R1, so if I put 2001, 1 being the port number, and that takes me, in fact it's already being used, there's only 1 console connection permitted, so I'll have to sign out of R1 here, or quit out of the telnet session, and I telnet to port 2001, that takes me to R1. Now, what this means is, I'm not dependent on internet connectivity to R1, I just need connectivity to the terminal server, and so on and so forth. If I put in 2002 there, that will take me to R2, R3 is 2003, HQ switch is 2004, and the backbone router is 2005. So you could have Putty Shortcuts. They use Putty in the actual testing lab, in the actual testing center. So I recommend you go with Putty and create these shortcuts, and don't get familiarized with clearing the line, etc., etc.